here. There we go. Now, a couple of things we probably need to know to help us better understand this story. Uh, Joseph is one of the sons of Jacob, and he's not the youngest, but he's the next to the youngest. And he was the child of Jacob's favorite wife, right? He's got 11 brothers, 10 of whom are older than him. There was his dad was not the brightest bulb in the lamp, let's just say, when it came to the way he treated his kids. Like most of us have heard the story of the coat of many colors, and we'll be talking about that later in the week. That his dad gave him a special coat and kind of left the older brothers of all things out. And so there was that jealousy, that tension in the family. In this story, it's going to be talking about sheaves. Now, I grew up out in the country, and so we talked about those things just as part of regular life. But as I was going over this story this morning out on my back porch, I thought, that's just not a word that I've heard in conversation for probably 30 years. That somebody's talked about a sheaf or sheaves, which is the plural. And what they would do is they would take wheat or rye or, whatever grain, and they would cut it, they would bundle it, and then they would tie it up. So it would be in these long, 6-7 foot, sometimes depending on the grain. And they would bundle those up. Then they would take them someplace and get all the grain off the stalks. And so bundling sheaves means they would tie those together so that they could be carried to the place where they would thresh it and get the actual grain or it's off of it. So in this story, you're going to have some sheaves and a sheaf. And so I let me just make you a promise while this is recording. I'm going to mess that up. I'm going to tell you ahead of time because it can be a little confusing going from the plural to the singular. And so we're actually not starting at Joseph's birth or anything. We're just kind of jumping right into the tension of his life. And so without further ado, here's our story from God's Word. Now, Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said to his brothers, "Hey, please listen to this dream that I had." And he said, we were out in the field binding up the sheaves, and my sheaf stood up, and all your sheaves stood up around my sheaf, and your sheaves bowed down to my sheaf. And his brother said, "So you are going to reign over us, and you are going to have dominion over us?" Right? And they hated him even more for his dreams and because of his words. And so Joseph had yet another dream. And he said to his brothers, "Look, I've dreamed another dream. I saw the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, and they bowed down to me." Well, he told that to his father and his brothers. And when his father heard it, he rebuked him and said, "So your mother and I and your brothers are going to bow down to the earth to you." Now, his brothers envied him, but his father, he kept these matters in his mind. And that's the story from God's word. All right. So just now I'm gonna cheat here just a little bit. As you think about the story, 2 dreams. Starts off with being hated. Then after the first dream, he's hated again. Then he has the second dream. His dad's involved. All right. So just to help you kind of chink, 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 get it in place. So what I'd like for you to do, turn to somebody next to you, or just kind of mute your sound and try to tell as much as you can remember from the point where now Joseph had a dream and he told his dream to his brothers and they hated him even more for it. All right. I know you probably haven't had an opportunity to get all the way through it, but I really don't care. I could pretend to be sweet and kind and all that, but I'm too old to make those fake efforts, right? Now, what I want you guys to do is to help me. So you can unmute unless you have somebody mowing their yard right behind you. So Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers. And what was the response?
They hated him.
They hated him for it. So he said, please do what?
Listen.
Yeah, listen to this dream. And he said, we were doing what? We were out.
Binding sheaves.
We were out in the field binding sheaves. And what did my sheaf do?
Stood up.
Yeah, my sheaf stood up and
your sheaves bowed down.
Yeah, they stood up and then they bowed down to what?
To me.
To my sheaf, right? To my sheaf. And his brothers went, wow, that is a really cool dream. Thank you so much for sharing.
No.
No. They said, so you are going to what?
Reign
Over us, and you're going to have dominion over us. Can you almost hear the sarcasm dripping off their words? And so what was the result emotionally for the brothers?
Hated him even more.
Yes, they hated him even more for his
pride,
dreams,
for his dreams and for his word. Yeah, Andrew, that's exactly right. Dreams and words, plural, right? And then Joseph dreamed yet another dream. And what did he do?
told
it to his brothers. This is a slow child.
And his father.
He would not have been in the quick bunch at school, right? He said, look, I've
dreamed another dream.
I've dreamed another dream. And this time the
sun,
moon, and 11 stars bow down to me.
Yeah. And so he told it to who?
His father.
And his
11 brothers.
Told to his father and his brothers. And his father's response was what?
anger.
Mother, I'm going to bow down to you.
He rebuked him
Oh.
and said, so your
Mother,
Mother,
and I
and
Your brothers.
your brothers indeed going to come and
bow down.
bow down to the earth before you. And so now his brothers, their emotion changed a little bit. Do you remember what it was? Hatred. Now what?
Even more.
They're jealous.
Yes, they envied him.
Jealous.
Now they envied him. So it's hatred, envy. And his dad did what?
Pondered on these
Ponder
things.
those things.
Yeah, he kept this matter in his mind. He kept this matter in his mind. So I've never done this story before. And as I started doing this story, I'm like, wow, I really like this story because it reminds me somewhat of Abraham. You know, when you first start studying Abraham, early on in Abraham's life, he's kind of a jerk, right? I mean, he does some pretty stupid things, right? He doesn't start off being Father Abraham. And so in this situation, we see Joseph. I mean, what do you think it might have been like to be one of his older brothers and to see, A, that your dad showed him favoritism, and B, now he's having these delusions of grandeur, right? So what might that have been like emotionally for them? We know from the story, but just as an older brother, what do you think?
Resentment.
Threatening. Yep.
Yeah, if he's the favorite one, it's kind of rubbing salt into the wound.
Jealous.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, see, in my family, I was the favorite child, but
Oh, whatever.
we all understand that. I was also the only child. So
So you were the most hated one too, I suppose.
So they didn't have a lot of choice. Although I do think they like the dog better than me. But so yeah, I mean, you know, I don't want to throw the brothers under the bus too readily because I think we do that too often in stories, right? We get out the black hat and we get out the white hat and we start putting the hats on people, whether they're good or whether they're bad. So let's look into the story and see what we can learn. So Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers and they hated him even more. And so he said to his brothers, hey, please listen to this dream I had. We were out working in the field, binding up the sheaves, and my sheaf got up and your sheaves got up and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, so you're going to reign over us? You're going to have dominion over us? And they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his words. All right, so we'll stop right there. So he had a dream, and then, hey, guys, you all need to listen to this dream. What might we learn about Joseph? I mean, do you see kind of a compulsion to share this with his brothers? I mean, what do you see there?
He's not the wisest, most discerning.
Okay.
He's a dreamer.
Oh, yeah.
He was-
more ways than one, isn't he?
He wasn't deceitful. He told people what was on his mind.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he wasn't like his dad had been. So I might have brought that up in the introduction that his dad deceived his older brother to get the birthright. Probably need to think about that for this story. And as you guys think of those things, all right, because we're working on this story together, you're not going to offend me if you go, hey, if I was telling this story, I might have brought that up. That's okay. All right, we're all learning this together. So, Andrew,
I was
Go ahead, Margie.
I was just thinking that if Joseph was the favorite and the brothers, lashed out at him or weren't kind to him because of that, maybe Joseph is kind of trying to get back at them too. Say, hey, I'm going to be better than you.
oh, yeah. Oh, I can see that. Yeah. Andrew, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have a lot of brothers and sisters. I have many adopted ones, and some of us are biologicals.
21?
There's 24 of us in all. 2 of us are no more.
Were you the favorite?
Yes, of course. I'm the first one called to ministry. So. It's interesting because Joseph could have kept quiet and probably should have kept quiet, but he didn't. He didn't keep quiet. And we can learn about Joseph from that. And I think that because he didn't keep quiet, he's either extremely naive or he's hurt from his brother's reactions of jealousy and hatred. And he's either he's acting a little bit autistic almost. He's either seeking attention or he's attacking them from another angle. And so, I'm going to go with the seeking attention because he does turn out to be a very wise leader later on in his life.
Yeah.
And so I think that he's seeking, God gave him this dream, obviously, but I think that he's seeking attention and he doesn't know how to do it properly and doesn't know how to respond to his father's affections, which are misdirected, and his brother's hatred, which is misdirected. He didn't know what to do.
Do we have any idea how old he was at this time?
Yeah, I really don't.
Because if he was a teenager, that would just fit.
Yeah, and
It'd be normal teenage stuff.
likely, that.
Well,
So,
not to mention that if you had a dream like that, you would probably tell people too. We don't have dreams that are that vivid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the brothers at once is maybe not the best plan.
yeah.
I was thinking that Joseph makes a good scapegoat
Okay.
because
Yeah.
everybody knows the trick. He was supposed to marry the one wife, but then he has to marry the older sister first. She has 6 of the children. Half of the boys are hers. Yet Joseph is the first of the other wife. But then there's these other 4, 2 and 2 from the 2 concubines. And so their status, even though they're older, their status may not be as high as that of the children of the wives. And so you could have multiple tensions going on with these children of 4 women, one of whom is now gone, right? And it says, your mother, well, it's his father's other wife. It's his aunt. And so that, if he's young, his mom, who might have given him more guidance, is not there. And so it seems like it's a little easier to pick on the boy that's dad's favorite instead of maybe some of these other tensions that could happen between the other 10. Not so much
Yeah.
Benjamin.
I really like what Marty was saying about the fact that this could have been his way of kind of getting back a little bit. But now in getting back, or if that's his motivation, and we're not told in the story, right? But kind of going along, Andrew, with what you said, the getting attention, that I can see a 15 or 16-year-old, right, doing that. But so what might we learn about? Do we see anything about Joseph emotionally here? Do we learn anything about his emotional makeup from what he says here, what he does?
Well, I don't think he's any different than people today. I think this is the story of human nature and how we have not changed.
Yeah. Sam?
He's not, is this a word you call? He's not cowed by his brothers. If he's the if he's got the victim stick and he's not letting it affect him, if he's telling them that he's still fighting his corner in a way, verbally. Maybe the only way he knows how or is able to at the minute.
All right.
And the brothers didn't like him, but it doesn't sound like he liked his brothers much either.
Oh, how do you see that, Marty?
Well, just by the way he's trying to lord it over them and telling them this story that makes them sound inferior. And I mean, just telling them that dream anyway in the first place. I mean, it wasn't a kind thing. It didn't edify the brothers. It only puffed him up.
You know, I think maybe Joseph had some hurts that were not addressed in his life. One was not being able to talk to someone. He didn't have a confidant because his mom had passed away. He was his younger brother, Benjamin, younger than him, didn't have really the wisdom to talk to him about. So maybe there's some hurt in there, and he's lashing out with the hurt or seeking acceptance or some kind of change in the family status. Something. He's looking for something. He just doesn't know how to look for it.
Well, in the story, do we see whether this is the first time he shared something like this, or do you see anything that would give us a hint?
In the introduction, did you say that his brothers hated him?
Well, actually, it says that in the
Because
story.
of the coat.
Hated him
Oh,
even
yeah.
more.
Yeah, they hated him even more. I had never noticed that before.
Listen to what the end of this first part of the story says. And they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his words. Right? So based on that, do we have any idea, based on what the story said, as to whether he's had other dreams other than this one? Now, we haven't even gotten to the sun, the moon, and the stars yet.
Plural.
Yeah.
Dream, plural.
Oh, dreams.
And words told in these before. These are just the first two recorded.
What do you guys see in the story?
It sounds like to me.
Well, these two dreams set the stage for the whole story.
Yeah, oh, they do. Yeah, no doubt.
And you know, he could, and I think, Andrew, you mentioned something about him being a little on the autistic spectrum. You know, I mean, it sounds like he just thought, this is a dream God gave me. You know, I'm going to share what God gave me, you know, without thinking.
Yeah, without any filters. Yeah.
Without thinking about the emotional ramifications. I mean, God tells you something, you tell other people. You know?
And
He has no filters.
So is this just like, you know, he had some, you know, he had some bad baklava and had a dream, you know, hey guys, let me tell you what I had, or what might we learn about his relationship with God from the fact that we know later on these dreams come true, right? Might be something else I need to bring up in the introduction. But do we learn anything about he and his relationship with God?
He ends up having a reputation for these dreams or being able to interpret them. So there has to be something there if later on others pick up on this.
Well,
Because
Sam, you're mentioning interpreting. Who does the interpretation of this dream?
He does. Oh, I guess it's the brothers do.
And then the father. Oh, brothers, yeah.
Yeah, but in this first part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, does he say you all are going to bow down before me?
No.
But I mean, who says that?
Everyone else.
So, I mean, does it seem like this dream was pretty clear as far as the brothers were concerned?
Yeah.
Yeah, they might have a sinking feeling too about his dream. They may have felt like it would come true.
Oh yeah, right.
Maybe they've had dreams like this themselves. I had dreams and in elementary school, I was picked on by some girls, and I was too intimidated. But I beat them up in my dreams. I didn't fight very well. I generally shoved them, and they hit something hard, but were never very hurt because I did love Jesus even as a child.
In
But
your dreams too.
it sounds like the sort of dream that God wouldn't have to be involved to have had this dream. we looking, we know the whole story, so we know it comes from God. But I imagine many a son had a dream that he ended up being the,
Well, all dreams are from God. They're just not all prophetic.
Yeah.
But you asked what we might learn about Joseph's relationship with God from his dreams and from his words and his dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that we can learn that God, one thing I like to say is God will use any burro gets in his way. So, God is using Joseph to reveal things through. And I think we can learn that God's relationship with Joseph is different than Joseph's relationship with God, because God is willing to speak to Joseph.
Okay.
But we don't see Joseph speaking back to God on how to use that dream wisely, or what that dream means, or what I'm going to do with it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I would say about the relationship, that part, is that God may have a better relationship with Joseph than Joseph has with God. We don't see Joseph talking to God about it at all.
Well, rather than sharing with all his brothers when they're apparently together, from what we can, see in the story, says, because they respond, "Are you really going to reign over us?" So it seems like they're in a group there. I mean, were there other things that Joseph could have done? I mean, other ways he could have responded to having this dream?
They could have said nothing.
Yeah, he could have just shut up, right? Yeah.
He could have gone to his dad and said, I had this strange dream. What do you think of this?
Yeah.
What should I do with it?
Yeah.
I think if he did understand if he knew at least what they were going to say, I don't know that he did. Maybe he didn't. He had no idea what the dream was about or anything. But if he had any idea, then it takes some amount of confidence to say, this is the dream I had, and I don't, and if it shows a real confidence if you can say and it's gonna happen. I don't know that was his attitude about it, but it's possible that he was like, you guys can be mad all you want, but this is God gave me this dream, and my sheep's gonna rise. So there's a chance that it shows a really confidence in, and maybe even an arrogance in in what's gonna happen. But it also might be just him being naive and not understanding the dream at all and not knowing when to shut up.
Yeah, fortunately, I've never had that problem.
Yeah, me neither.
Oops. Well, Andrew.
There's something else that's interesting, because they're talking about working in the field and doing sheaves and stuff. And Joseph, another story, of course, but he was sent to check on his brothers. He was not sent to work in the field. He may not actually have had the hands that were calloused to work in the field and do the sheaves. And so I think what he probably should have done differently is talk to his dad, who obviously loved him, gave him this coat of many colors and whatnot, and discussed it with him first.
Yeah.
I thought about going to his father, but in these kinds of communities, secrets are incredibly hard to keep. So it's like if you go to tell dad, the brothers could interpret that as you went to your dad so he would know that you were going to be first. So it's kind of like the boy can't win if he tells anybody.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
Well, what about his brothers? So Joseph shares this dream. In the story, do we see him anywhere saying, "Hey, I had this dream of from God"? Do we see him saying that anywhere? Does it seem like the brothers understood that though, based on their
Yeah, I agree. I understand it that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, could they have responded differently rather than getting angry and hating him even more for his dreams and his words? I mean, how else?
Well, it was Old Testament times. People
Oh, yeah.
didn't get over things that easily. They had to poke you in the eye.
But did they have choices?
well, they could have beat him up right then, but they didn't. That was nice.
Yeah,
Whether his father would have beat them up though.
yeah.
Sometimes it just still seems worth it, though.
It doesn't really say they didn't beat him up. In my experience, that's pretty common as the youngest child. So it might just not go. Might not be worth noting again.
Well, and they actually never laid hands on him.
Yeah, which is interesting. We're going to talk about that later on in the week. So that's Andrew.
Yeah, they could have just asked him, what do you think that means, Joseph? Go ahead and interpret that for us. Enough subtlety here. Let's come straight to the chase. Let him do the interpreting or the speaking and take it from there. Instead, they chose to interpret it, and God just may have honored their interpretation of it. It may have meant
They were
something.
jumping to conclusions.
Well, you mentioned God, all right? So God gives him this dream about these sheaves bowing down to him. So now he knows how the rest of his life is going to be mapped out. He sees prison coming and slavery, and he knows he's going to be the second in command of Egypt. Is that what we see in this dream?
No.
So what might we learn about God from the fact that he gives him this dream of kind of end results of, we know the rest of the story, right? But he doesn't include all the details. Does that tell us anything about God and the way he communicates to his people?
God gave him hope
Ooh,
when he was in distress.
okay. God gave him hope.
It's hard because we know the end of the story,
Yeah, we do.
but and I don't know how much you want to do that rather than focus on this story, but really Joseph kind of had to tell them so that when it actually happened, they could remember that dream. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say Joseph did wrong, because I think God wanted them to know that, this was coming so that they could see in hindsight that, yeah, they had warning all along. And it did something to them.
Yeah, and Mary, you bring up a great point, that tension between what does God cause and what does God use that's part of somebody's personality, and that that tension that we're not really sure of. Marty?
Since we're going over the line a little bit, I'm just kind of amazed at God, because way back then he's setting things up. Because if the brothers don't hate him and want to get rid of him, he's not going to end up in Egypt, and God's going to cause this famine. He wants the family out of there, or he wants them protected. So he's got this long-range plan that he's starting right here with this young boy, because of this dream he gives him and the brothers hating him, and setting this whole thing in motion for protecting that family.
Well, and even just staying in this story, what might we learn about God from the fact that he shows Joseph the end result, and the brothers understand it, right? They get it. No question. This is what you're saying. And yet God leaves all the space in the middle blank. What might we learn about God from the way he works here?
Well, he gives us self-determination. He lets us lead our lives.
Okay, all right.
It's
He doesn't give us all the details.
right.
Well, let's look at this next part of the story. So Joseph dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I've dreamed another dream. The sun and the moon and the stars and the 11 stars bowed down before me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? So your mother and I and your brothers are indeed going to come and bow down to the earth before you." And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So kind of stop there. So so what might we learn about God? I mean, because do you see this dream coming from God? I guess that's a better question.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So what might we learn about God from the fact here again, he's giving him another dream.
He's given him more information this time. That
Okay.
it's not brothers, it's his father and the mother too.
Ooh, yeah, good point.
And he's kind of confirming it as well. It's kind of the same basically as the previous one, but there's more people involved in it this time, and they're all doing the same thing towards him.
Mm.
I think he seemed to be willing to put Joseph into a really hard place.
Mm. Okay.
You know, if he was true to his dream and told people, he was going to get persecuted, you know, and yet it was a dream from God. And I do believe that God wanted that dream shared so that they could look back and see it. And poor Joseph kind of had to take the fallout from it.
Yeah, the heat. Yeah.
So how do we reconcile it with the commandment about honoring your father and your mother?
Wasn't given yet.
Well, I think it's interesting. All the sheaves are a good thing. You know, he's a sheaf, but so are his brothers. So they're all, you know, it's not like he's one special thing and there's something else. And then in the next dream, you know, his father and mother are sun and moon. That's pretty exalted. And his brothers are stars, which is also exalted. So his brothers aren't demeaned. His parents aren't demeaned in the story, but they are bowing down to him. So it's like, you know, you think Joseph isn't anything in the next dream, the second dream, he's just him, because we don't really have a thing bigger than worthy of more honor than the sun and the moon.
Yeah.
In the celestial world.
What are some
They
of the
sort
rest?
of retain their place.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Can I disagree with Mary for a minute?
No,
No.
I'm allowed to disagree with Diane.
Mary said that that God wanted the dream revealed, and I'm not too sure of that. I think God was willing to show Joseph some things that will happen in his life. He may have been a little precipitous in sharing them, the way he shared them and when he shared them. You also asked what we can learn about God, that he would show these dreams, but just that part and not the future, not the in-between part, that's the suffering part. I wonder if God had shown that, if Joseph would also have shared about the famine and about him being in jail and about him being sold as a slave. What is God willing to reveal and what does he want us to reveal? I think are two very distinct things that we need to think about. And obviously, you think about God's word should edify or exhort or comfort. And Joseph's revelation of this to his brothers and his dad neither edifies, exhorts, or comforts. So maybe it was just for Joseph to keep himself. until some other time.
Maybe for Joseph to keep, but also maybe for God to kind of get the result he wanted in getting Joseph to Egypt. The lads need a wee bit of a push here. They don't hate him quite enough yet. Let's give them a wee push.
See, as a good Calvinist,
Yeah, got to tuck that in, Butch. It's starting to show.
sorry guys, this is a conversation Andrew and I have. We're on opposite ends of the fence, which makes it fun to do stories. So we can bring up some of the things that really aren't going to matter at all in eternity. But what do we learn? I mean, at the early start, it was they hated him even more. They hated him even more. And now, what do we learn about the response of the brothers?
Envy.
Envy.
I'm a little surprised. I would have thought we had envy already going.
Yeah.
But,
I-
yeah.
I would probably-
So, I mean, how do you see envy being different than hatred? I mean, what do you see there? I'm just interested in what you see the relationship being between.
I'm not getting dreams. How come I'm not getting dreams? I can come up with some lies about dreams too. It's not that big a thing.
I don't think envy requires malice towards the person that you're envious of.
Okay.
Hatred is a an act of like saying, man, I don't like that person. Envy is more selfish and just I don't like that they have that and I don't, but not necessarily I'm mad at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It says that they specifically hated him. They were probably also envious, but it does say specifically they hated him even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've been talking about this. There's kind of a gap. There's a bunch of things they don't know. And I'd never really thought before that this suffering that Joseph has is what makes it possible for him to be reconciled with his brothers and still rule over them. God is choosing Joseph for this role. And it would be almost impossible for that envy not to happen for someone in that society that far down in the birth order, to not be resented by brothers so much older. And yet, because that he goes through this suffering and they have a hand in the suffering, and then they bear that secret shame that only they know of what they're going to end up doing to their brother. It's like all of that makes it possible to reconcile later on. That it looks like God's setting them up for some really ugly things, but relationship is so important to God, and that these 12 brothers become a nation, and maybe that's part of the price.
But even here in this story, all right, even here just in this part of the story, does we've looked at the brothers understanding the first dream. So does the dad understand the ramifications of this second dream?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He says, we're going to bow down to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he sees the sun, the moon, and the stars. I mean, does he understand what that dream's about?
Yeah.
As far as the bowing down?
Yeah, he knows what it means.
I mean, you talk about, and you talk about something hard in a society. I mean, this is the guy that this is the guy that wrestled with God, and now his son is saying, "You're going to bow down to me."
Yeah, but he handles it in he's old. He is upset. He isn't happy. He's indignant, maybe, but he's still he doesn't envy him. he kind of coveting almost, which is a sin. But he believes him. He keeps it. He says, "Well, we'll see if this does happen." So he's willing to hold it and judge if it really is a true dream or not, rather than condemning it right from the start because you don't like it.
Wow, I like that. The fact that he does kind of, I'm going to rebuke you, but I'm going to file this away.
Mm-hmm.
Butch, coming from a large family, there's always tensions of different things. And in our family, there's a 40-year age gap at least between the oldest and the youngest. And I think nobody handled this well. The brothers did not handle it well, and Joseph did not handle it well. So I think that we can learn that the revelation of God is going to bring things out of people, brought things out of them, all of them, that they may not have known about. I mean, it brought out of Joseph some arrogance, some pride, a bit of foolishness. Brought out of the brothers more hatred. Brought out of the dad, wow, maybe I do have something to learn from my son. So I think that we can learn that God is willing to allow tension and problems in relationships to teach people and to teach, well, especially to teach this family how to get along a little bit better, differently.
What do some of the rest of you guys see there?
Yeah, I like that.
Well, I've always thought that all of these patriarchs, could be on Dr. Phil. They're none of them really great at family. And this has made me think of Jacob and Esau's relationship. And that results in pretty much permanent distancing and trouble, down the line with them, sometimes lying, sometimes not. And just that it's sad sometimes to see the brokenness that can be in families. That we need to always be striving if we want good relationships within a family. Because even among these people that are so chosen by God, it's not a given that you get any harmony. And yet God seems to be working towards that. We don't see it in this story. But left to their own devices, this could so easily never have gone well.
Well, let me ask one final question here about, just to talk about some spiritual observations in the story. So early in the story, he shares, he shares the dream, and man, I mean, it just goes south in a hurry. The brothers are, really, we're going to bow down to you. What a jerk, kind of thing, right? And then the second dream, the brothers now are envious. The father rebukes him, but keeps it in his mind, keeps the matter in his mind. I mean, are there other ways, rather than being hateful, envious, rebuking while still thinking about, okay, what's this mean? I mean, could they have responded differently? The brothers, the dad, I mean, this is, God's giving him dreams, and they seem to have a common theme. I mean, how else might the people in the dream, so to speak, how else might they have responded?
Have a family discussion. What could this possibly mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Andrew?
Reaffirm love. I'm sorry, Marley. Go ahead. Reaffirm love to everyone and let everyone know that they're loved and accepted. That reaffirmation, we don't see it. Don't see that reaffirmation.
Yeah.
that anyone is loved in that family.
Yeah.
Having 4 wives probably had a lot to do with that.
Ooh. So,
Just say, hey, that's really interesting, Joseph. Why don't we wait and see what comes of that?
Yeah.
I was about to call on myself. I saw my hand go up. Now, yeah, that was me. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of ways they could have responded, but well, early in the story, we were talking about the fact that God just gave Joseph, kind of the end result, and left all the stuff in the middle, kind of blank, kind of up in the air. I mean, does God still do that with His people today, where He, might show them something that they're supposed to do or they're going to do, but the details in the middle get kind of left out? Does that still happen?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, what might that look like, just in general? You think
In quarantine for 5 weeks now?
years, 14 years?
2 or 3 weeks in Peru and 2 or 3 weeks in Mexico, and no end in sight in Mexico because we just started doing this. Nobody saw this one, that's for sure.
Yeah, I definitely did not see this coming.
No.
Yeah, I had no.
Charismatic prophets said anything about it either.
Even the Baptist prophets were silent on that.
Yeah.
How about Nostradamus?
Yeah, I'm sure he had something. I'm sure if somebody read the book, they would make it say
What to
that
say?
he had something.
Exactly.
Yeah, just vague enough that it can mean something. But I wonder if anybody's ever had that experience where God's spoken to you about something, and yet as you got into it, you were like, "Whoa, didn't see this part of that coming." Mary?
I actually just, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because my daughter just had a baby, and a friend of mine from Minnesota called to congratulate me, and she was, it just brought back so many memories because she was one of the first Vietnamese refugees that came. Minnesota got a whole bunch of refugees that changed our population dynamic drastically. But she was one of the first, and through some connections that we had, someone was asked to look after her, and he didn't feel comfortable, and so he kind of brought her over and dropped her off at our house. I lived with a bunch of other Christian girls, and said, I don't think single guys should be watching out for this lady. Could you just take care of her? And I mean, northern Minnesota is as white as it comes, and I'd never, except for Swedes and Finns, I'd never really experienced anything like that. And, but it changed my life, because that was when I discovered that I had a gift for communicating with people who speak really bad English, or knowing
Probably why we get along so well.
Yeah. And it just changed the whole course of my life. I ended up going back to school, and I'm an ESL teacher now. And it all started there. And if you told me at that time that this one woman coming into my house was going to just change the whole course of my career, my ministry, everything that I did, I would have laughed.
Yeah. Yeah, Mary, that you remind me, when I was growing up, I moved around a lot because my father had some drinking issues, and would threaten to kill my mom, so we would move. In my hometown, I counted one time, I lost count at 35 places I'd lived in my hometown. And that's not counting the other towns in our state or other states that I lived in growing up. So I went to 14 different schools before I graduated from high school. And that's not counting the schools I went to twice or the 2 schools that I went to 3 times. That's just individual schools. And so I was always the new kid and always moving around. And you know, never really, as you grow up and you start, you know, I've been a church planter now for a number of years. And then about 8 years ago, God drugged me screaming and kicking onto airplanes to travel around the world doing this. And one day, as I was laying in a strange bed in a strange country, and I actually woke up and didn't know what country I was in. I was trying to remember where I was, which when you get older, that happens. And the Lord reminded me of how he had prepared me as a child for what I was doing right now. You know, as a child, it didn't make any sense, and I don't think he caused it. So please understand what I'm saying. But he used what happened. And I mean, you can drop me off any place, and I am just as comfortable as I am here, except for California. California is the exception. I always feel weird in California. But every place else I've ever been, you know, God, he didn't fill in the blanks, and it wasn't until I hit almost my 60s that I began to realize, whoa, there was some good from that I'm bearing the fruit of now, you know, and looking back, having seen his hand using those things that as a kid were pretty painful, just to, you know, be real honest. So in this story, what are some things you see in this story that might help us just in life tomorrow? So there's some things that stand out to you. You're like, yeah,
You know, I think something that stands out to me is be slow to speak, swift to hear, slow to judgment. Not like Joseph.
Down somewhere.
Yeah, not like Joseph, exactly. Just be a little bit slower, seek some counsel.
Yeah. Anybody else? How can you see this playing out?
I think just to remember that God loves us so much. This is a family with some problems.
Yeah.
And yet God has such big plans for them, so much bigger than their little squabbles and tensions. They're wandering around. They have no idea that there's going to be this Messiah, that they're going to point them back to them, that their names will be known around the world.
Yeah.
That they're a little concerned about bowing down to their brother, and yet everybody's going to know all of their names. That's just unmerited favor.
Oh yeah.
God is so gracious to us, and in a different way, but we can count on God's graciousness if he's willing to work with this particular crew.
Well, you mentioned the crew, and I just got to ask, because this has been a struggle for me my entire Christian walk. I mean, is anybody else amazed that Jacob is, you know, I mean, he's one of the founding fathers. I mean, this guy to me is just a total jerk, right? I mean, he just gets it, like he gets it all wrong. And yet, you know, it fills me full of hope.
Me too. That's what I was going to say. It's very hopeful to think like, man, I could be doing a lot worse and God could still work with that.
I'm like, you know, Lord, I was not a perfect father, but I wasn't Jacob. So Well, this story is in Genesis chapter 37. We only did 6 verses, verses 5 through 11. And again, you know, hopefully Sam might watch the very end of this, but even paring it down to this, you know, I try to get it down to the lowest common denominator that I could for us to be able to talk. And we've gone for over an hour just in conversation. And so hopefully you can see how you know, just not getting in a hurry, not rushing, and sometimes going places in the questions that, you know, they're not going to bring like you know, revelatory information. It's not like your life is going to be changed because of it, but it just adds a little thing here and a little thing there. And sometimes you go someplace and go, wow, I didn't learn anything at all by that. And that's okay, right? So then you learn where to focus. So, well, let me hit the stop record button.